The billionaire stepped out of his luxury car with a slow, confident smile, the kind that came from a life where money solved every problem. His name was known across the city, spoken with awe by some and resentment by others. He was famous for his sharp business mind, his expensive taste, and his habit of turning everything into a public show. That afternoon, he was driving through a poor neighborhood, a place he usually avoided, but a sudden mechanical failure forced him to stop. The engine made a harsh sound and then went silent. For the first time that day, something did not obey him. People nearby noticed the shiny car that looked out of place among the old buildings and dusty streets. Some paused their work. Others gathered quietly, curious about what a billionaire was doing there. The man looked around with annoyance, tapping his expensive watch, already late for an important meeting. He pulled out his phone, tried calling his assistant, then his mechanic, but the signal was weak. His patience disappeared fast. That was when he noticed her. She stood a short distance away, holding a small bag filled with old tools. Her clothes were worn and faded, her shoes dusty, her hair tied back simply. She was a young black girl, no older than 16. Her face showed neither fear nor excitement, just calm attention. She had been watching the car from the moment it stopped, listening carefully to the engine's last sound. After a moment, she stepped forward. "I think I can help," she said softly. The billionaire turned toward her and laughed. It was not a kind laugh. It was loud, sharp, and full of disbelief. He looked her up and down, judging her in seconds. In his mind, she did not belong near a car worth more than most houses on that street. "You," he said, still smiling. "Fix this car." People around them exchanged looks. Some felt embarrassed for her. Others expected her to walk away in shame. But she did not. She stood still, meeting his eyes, waiting. The billionaire's smile slowly turned into a smirk. An idea formed in his mind, the kind he enjoyed. He loved showing power, especially in front of an audience. He wanted to turn the moment into entertainment. "I'll tell you what," he said loudly so everyone could hear. "I'll give you 100 million if you fix my car." Gasps filled the air. Some people laughed nervously. Others shook their heads, knowing it was a joke. The billionaire was amused by his own words. He was sure there was no risk. In his world, promises like this were harmless when he believed failure was guaranteed. The girl did not react the way he expected. She did not smile, beg, or argue. She simply asked, "May I look at the engine?" That calm response surprised a few people. The billionaire raised an eyebrow. He expected fear or excitement, not confidence. Still smirking, he stepped aside and waved his hand. "Go ahead," he said. "Entertain us." As she approached the car, the crowd grew quieter. She placed her bag on the ground and opened it carefully. Inside were old tools, scratched and rusty, clearly used many times. The billionaire noticed them and almost laughed again. To him, they looked like toys compared to the advanced systems inside his car. She opened the hood slowly and leaned in, listening, observing, touching parts gently. Her eyes moved with purpose. She was not guessing. She was reading the machine like a language she understood well. The billionaire crossed his arms, watching with amusement. In his mind, this was already over. He imagined the story he would tell later, about the poor girl who thought she could fix a billionaire's car. He enjoyed moments where his wealth placed him far above others. But something strange happened. Minutes passed, and she did not stop. She did not look confused or lost. She worked silently, completely focused. The crowd leaned closer. Whispers spread. The billionaire's smirk slowly faded into curiosity, though he refused to admit it. He told himself it meant nothing. He was still in control, still powerful, still the man who could laugh at impossible dreams. He did not yet realize that this moment, which began with a smirk, was about to challenge everything he believed about power, wealth, and who truly deserved respect. The girl's name was Aaliyah, though very few people ever bothered to remember it. In that neighborhood, people knew her more for what she did than who she was. She lived in a small, broken-down house at the edge of the street with her mother and two younger brothers. Their roof leaked when it rained, and electricity came and went like an unwanted guest. Money was always short, and worry was always present, but Aaliyah had learned early that complaining never fixed anything. Her father had been a mechanic before he passed away. When she was still very young, she would sit beside him on the floor of a tiny garage, watching his hands move with patience and care. He never treated machines like dead objects. He spoke to them, listened to them, and respected them. Before he died, he taught her how to listen to engines the way some people listen to music. After his death, the garage closed, but the lesson stayed alive inside her. Life did not slow down for grief. Bills piled up. Food became limited. Aaliyah began fixing things not as a hobby, but as a way to survive. Broken fans, old bikes, generators, even abandoned cars that no one believed could work again. She learned by trying, failing, and trying again. Every mistake became a lesson. Every success became quiet proof that she was capable, even if the world refused to notice. At school, teachers called her distracted. Classmates laughed at her worn clothes and oil-stained hands. Some assumed she was slow because she spoke little. What they did not understand was that her mind was always busy, solving problems no textbook could teach. When lessons ended, she hurried home, not to rest, but to help her family. She fixed things for neighbors in exchange for food or a few coins. Respect came slowly, but survival demanded patience. That afternoon, when the billionaire's car stopped on her street, Aaliyah had been on her way back from repairing a generator. The sound of the engine caught her attention immediately. It was wrong, sharp, uneven. She stopped walking and listened carefully. Most people saw a rich man's car. She heard a problem asking to be solved. When the billionaire laughed at her, it did not hurt the way people expected. She had heard worse before. What mattered to her was the machine. The challenge did not feel like a joke to her. It felt like an opportunity, not for money, but to prove something she already knew about herself. As she worked on the car, memories of her father guided her hands. She remembered his voice telling her never to rush, never to force a solution, and never to doubt what she understood. She noticed small details others would miss. A loose connection, a sensor misreading, a problem hidden behind expensive design. The crowd watched her, some with doubt, some with quiet hope. To them, she was no longer just a poor girl. She was someone daring to stand where she was told she did not belong. Each second she spent working chipped away at the assumptions people had made about her life. The billionaire, meanwhile, grew restless. He shifted his weight, checked his watch again, and forced confidence into his posture. He told himself this was still a joke, still entertainment, but a small, uncomfortable thought crept into his mind. What if he was wrong? Aaliyah finally stepped back from the engine and wiped her hands on her jeans. She took a deep breath, not from fear, but from focus. She knew what she had found. She knew what needed to be done next. For the first time, the billionaire did not laugh. He watched her closely, trying to read her expression, trying to understand how a girl like her could stand so calmly in front of something designed to intimidate. He had built his life on power, wealth, and control. Aaliyah had built hers on necessity, skill, and quiet strength. Neither of them knew it yet, but this meeting was no longer about a broken car. It was about a truth that was beginning to surface, a truth that would soon leave no one untouched. The street felt different now. What had started as a moment of laughter and curiosity slowly turned into silence, mixed with tension. People who had been standing far away moved closer, drawn by something they could not fully explain. Phones were raised, whispers passed from one person to another, and eyes stayed fixed on the open hood of the luxury car. Aaliyah did not notice the attention. Her world had narrowed to wires, metal, and sound. She leaned closer, her fingers moving carefully, checking one thing after another. She followed the problem step by step, not rushing, not guessing. To her, the car was not rich or powerful. It was simply broken. The billionaire cleared his throat, trying to break the silence. "So," he said, forcing a laugh, "found anything yet?" Aaliyah nodded slowly. "Yes," she replied. "The system is confused. It thinks something is wrong that isn't, and it shuts everything down to protect itself." Her words made little sense to the crowd, but the confidence behind them did. The billionaire frowned. He was used to mechanics speaking in complicated terms, but this sounded simple. Too simple. "You're saying the car is wrong," he said, half amused, half irritated. I'm saying the car is listening to bad information, she answered calmly. That response unsettled him. He waved his hand dismissively. Go on then, he said. Fix it. Aaliyah asked for a small tool, something specific. A man from the crowd handed it to her. She thanked him softly and returned to the engine. She adjusted a connection, cleaned a sensor carefully, and tightened a loose part hidden deep inside. Her movements were steady, practiced, and confident. Minutes passed. Sweat formed on her forehead, but she did not stop. The billionaire shifted again, his earlier smirk completely gone now. He told himself she was wasting time. Still, he could not look away. Aaliyah stepped back and closed the hood halfway. She paused, listening. Then she opened it again and made one final adjustment. When she was done, she straightened up and looked at the billionaire. Try now, she said. The billionaire hesitated. For a brief moment, doubt crept into his mind. He brushed it away quickly. This was impossible. He slid into the driver's seat, started the car, and waited. Nothing happened. A few people sighed. Someone laughed quietly. The billionaire felt relief wash over him. He smiled again, ready to speak. Then the engine turned over. Smooth, clean, strong. The sound filled the street, rich and steady, nothing like before. The car did not just start. It purred. Silence exploded into noise. Gasps, voices, disbelief. People stepped back as if the car had come alive on its own. The billionaire froze, hands tight on the steering wheel. His smile vanished completely. He turned off the engine and started it again. Perfect. He stepped out of the car slowly, staring at the engine as if it had betrayed him. He looked at Aaliyah, truly looked at her for the first time. Ow, he asked quietly. Aaliyah wiped her hands and shrugged. It was protecting itself from a problem that didn't exist anymore, she said. Someone replaced a part without resetting the system. The billionaire's mind raced. This was not luck. This was skill. Real skill. And it had come from the last person he expected. The crowd buzzed with excitement now. Some people smiled proudly. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Cameras were everywhere. You said, Aaliyah continued gently, that you would give me 100 million. The words hit him like a slap. He had forgotten, or hoped everyone else would. The billionaire laughed again, but this time it was nervous. You can't be serious, he said. That was a joke. Aaliyah did not raise her voice. She did not argue. She simply looked around at the crowd, at the phones recording everything, then back at him. You made the promise, she said. Not me. For the first time in years, the billionaire felt something he rarely experienced. Pressure. Not from markets or deals, but from truth. His words had weight now. His power was being tested, not by wealth, but by integrity. He glanced at the crowd, at the girl standing calmly before him, and at the car that should not have been fixed. And he realized that no matter what he chose next, his life would never look the same again. The air felt heavy after the engine came back to life. What should have been a quick moment turned into something much larger. People were no longer whispering now. They were talking loudly, pointing at the car, pointing at Aaliyah, replaying the moment on their phones. The street, once ignored by the city, had suddenly become the center of attention. The billionaire stood still, his thoughts racing. He had faced pressure before, but never like this. This was not a boardroom where words could be bent or delayed. This was real. This was public. And this was recorded. He straightened his expensive jacket and forced a smile. All right, he said loudly, trying to regain control. You did something impressive. I'll admit that. Aaliyah listened quietly. Compliments had never paid her family's bills, so she did not react. She waited. But the billionaire continued, raising a finger. Fixing a car doesn't mean you understand the value of money. 100 million isn't something people just give away. The crowd reacted immediately. Some booed. Others argued. A few shouted that a promise was a promise. The billionaire raised his hands, asking for calm, but the situation was slipping from his control. Aaliyah finally spoke again. You laughed when you said it, she said calmly. But you still said it. Her voice was steady, not angry, not proud, just honest. That honesty unsettled him more than shouting ever could. He looked at her again and noticed details he had ignored before. The grease on her hands, the tiredness in her eyes, the calm strength in the way she stood. This was not someone chasing money. This was someone who understood responsibility. A man from the crowd stepped forward. "Sir," he said, "my phone is recording. So are many others. This is everywhere now." The billionaire felt his stomach tighten. He imagined headlines, not about success, but about failure of character. His reputation mattered to him almost as much as money. He took a deep breath. "Let's be reasonable," he said. "What do you really want, girl?" Aaliyah looked at him, then at the crowd, then back at him. "I want you to keep your word," she said. "Not just for me, for everyone watching." That sentence hit harder than any insult. It reminded him of something he had forgotten long ago. Trust. He walked a few steps away, pretending to take a call, though his phone screen was dark. He needed time to think. The cameras followed him anyway. There was no escape. He thought about his childhood, about promises broken by adults who had power. He had sworn never to be weak, never to be embarrassed. Yet here he was, trapped by his own arrogance. When he returned, his expression had changed. The smirk was gone, replaced by something closer to seriousness. "I won't hand over cash on the street," he said slowly. "But I will do something better." The crowd leaned in. "I will set up a legal trust," he continued. "Education, training, housing support, everything verified, everything real." Some people nodded. Others looked unsure. All eyes turned to Aaliyah. She listened carefully. She was not greedy. She was cautious. "And my family," she said quietly. "Yes," he replied. "Your family too." A pause followed. Then Aaliyah nodded once. "Then keep your word," she said again. The billionaire extended his hand. She shook it, her grip firm, confident. The crowd erupted. Cheers, applause, disbelief. The story spread faster than anyone could control. Not just about a car, but about a moment when power was challenged by truth. As the billionaire prepared to leave, he looked back at Aaliyah one last time. "You surprised me," he said honestly. She replied simply, "You surprised yourself." As his car drove away, working perfectly now, the streets slowly returned to normal. But something had changed. Not just for Aaliyah, but for everyone who had witnessed the moment. They had seen wealth hesitate. They had seen skill speak louder than status. And they knew the real story was far from over. By the next morning, the story had traveled far beyond the small street where it began. Videos of the moment played on phones, laptops, and televisions. People watched the billionaire's confident smirk fade into shock, and they watched the quiet girl stand firm without raising her voice. Comment sections filled with anger, praise, and debate. Some called it justice. Others called it luck. But almost everyone agreed on one thing. Something important had happened. Aaliyah woke up that morning before sunrise, just like always. The noise outside her house was louder than usual. Cars slowed down. Strangers stood near the corner, whispering and pointing. Her mother noticed it first, fear flickering in her eyes. Attention was dangerous for people like them. Attention had never brought good things before. Aaliyah tried to keep her routine normal. She washed her face, helped her brothers get ready, and ate a small breakfast. But her hands trembled slightly. She was not scared of the billionaire. She was scared of disappointment. She had seen promises break too many times. At school, everything felt different. Teachers looked at her with surprise. Students who once ignored her now stared openly. Some smiled. Some asked questions. Others suddenly wanted to be her friend. She answered politely but kept her distance. Fame felt strange, heavy, uncomfortable. Meanwhile, the billionaire sat in his office, surrounded by advisors. Screens showed the video again and again. His public image team argued loudly. Some said he should deny everything. Others warned that backing out would destroy his reputation. Sponsors were watching. Investors were watching. The world was watching. For the first time in years, money alone could not solve the problem. Trust had entered the room. He remembered Aaliyah's words. Keep your word. Not shouted. Not demanded. Just stated as fact. That afternoon, a black car stopped outside Aaliyah's house. Neighbors watched from windows and doorways. Her mother held Aaliyah's hand tightly. Men in suits stepped out, calm and respectful. One of them explained why they were there. Papers, meetings, proof. Not promises made in the air, but written commitments. Aaliyah listened carefully. She asked questions no one expected. About education. About long-term support. About her brother's future. The men exchanged glances. They were not used to this. She was not thinking like a poor girl. She was thinking like someone who understood survival. When the billionaire finally arrived, he did not step out smiling. He looked serious, tired, changed. He entered the house, looked around at the cracked walls and simple furniture, and felt something unfamiliar. Shame. This is where you live, he said quietly. Yes, Aaliyah replied. This is home. They sat at the small table. No cameras. No crowd. Just truth. He explained the plan again. Scholarships. Mentors. A future that did not depend on luck. This time his voice held no jokes. Aaliyah's mother cried silently. She had spent her life protecting her children from broken hopes. Now she did not know whether to believe. Aaliyah finally spoke. Why are you really doing this? She asked. The billionaire paused. Because I laughed, he said. And I shouldn't have. That answer mattered more than the money. When he left, the neighborhood felt lighter. Not rich, not suddenly perfect, but hopeful. A feeling many there had not felt in years. That evening, Aaliyah sat alone outside, staring at the sky. Her life was changing faster than she could understand. She thought about her father, about the lessons he taught her with oil-stained hands and patience. She wished he could see this moment. But she also knew something important. Fixing the car had not changed who she was. It had only revealed her. Across the city, the billionaire looked out from his penthouse window. The world praised him now, but he knew the truth. The girl had given him something no amount of money ever had. A lesson. And that lesson was only beginning to shape what came next. Weeks passed, but life did not suddenly become easy. Change came slowly, like a careful hand turning a fragile page. Aaliyah still woke up early every morning, still helped her brothers, still walked the same streets. The difference was not in her routine, but in how people looked at her now. Respect followed her steps, though she never asked for it. The support promised by the billionaire began to take shape. Meetings replaced rumors. Real people replaced cameras. Aaliyah was introduced to engineers, teachers, and mentors who spoke to her not as a poor girl, but as someone with rare potential. At first, she barely spoke during these meetings. She listened, observed, and learned, just as she always had. The classroom felt different when she returned to school programs designed for her growth. For the first time, she was surrounded by machines meant to be taken apart and rebuilt. She touched clean tools, advanced equipment, and technology she had only seen in pictures. Some students stared at her, unsure how she belonged there. She ignored them. She had learned long ago that doubt from others was nothing new. At home, her family adjusted carefully. Bills were paid on time. The light stayed on. Food was no longer counted by portions. Her mother smiled more, but worry never fully left her eyes. She had lived too long waiting for things to fall apart. Trust came slowly. Across the city, the billionaire faced his own quiet changes. The applause had faded, replaced by reflection. He found himself thinking often about that street, about the moment he laughed. For years, he had believed success made him smarter, better, untouchable. But one broken car had exposed a crack in that belief. He began questioning decisions he once made without hesitation. He listened more in meetings. He noticed people he once ignored. Power felt different now. He realized it was not just about having control, but about how that control was used. One afternoon, he visited the workshop where Aaliyah was training. There were no cameras, no announcements. She was focused on an engine when he arrived, hands moving with confidence. She did not notice him at first. "You're faster now," he said gently. She looked up, surprised, then nodded. "I have better tools," she replied. He smiled, not proudly, but humbly. "No," he said. "You always had the skill." They stood in silence for a moment. He watched her work, truly watching this time. He saw patience, discipline, and respect for the machine. Things he had once mistaken for weakness. "I've invested in many people," he admitted. "Most of them wanted shortcuts." Aaliyah wiped her hands. "Shortcuts break things," she said simply. That sentence stayed with him long after he left. News of Aaliyah's progress slowly replaced the viral video. She was no longer just the girl who fixed a billionaire's car. She was becoming something else. A symbol, though she never asked to be one. Young girls from similar neighborhoods began reaching out. Some asked for advice. Others just wanted to be seen. She answered when she could. She reminded them of one truth. Skill matters. Patience matters. And no one gets to decide your limits except you. One evening, Aaliyah sat with her brothers, helping them with homework. They looked at her with pride, but also fear. "Will you leave us?" one asked quietly. She hugged him tightly. "No," she said. "I'm building something. For all of us." In another part of the city, the billionaire stood alone again, looking at his reflection. He saw a man who had learned something late, but not too late. He knew the world praised him for generosity, but he also knew the truth. He had not saved Aaliyah. She had saved him from remaining blind. And as both of their paths continued to change, one thing became clear. That single moment on a forgotten street had not just fixed a car. It had fixed a misunderstanding that power had taught him his whole life. The moment that had begun on that small, dusty street had grown far beyond anyone's imagination. Aaliyah's life had changed, but so had the billionaires. Neither of them had expected the ripple their encounter would create. Yet, here they were, standing at the edge of something bigger, something neither money nor pride could fully control. The billionaire sat in his office late one night, staring at the city lights below. The streets that had always felt like playgrounds for his wealth now seemed different. Each window held stories he had ignored for years, stories of struggle, skill, and courage. He could not stop thinking about the girl. Not the one who fixed his car, but the one who had refused to be humiliated, the one who had spoken truth calmly and clearly when he had been so certain of his power. He had spent his life surrounded by people who wanted something from him, people who flattered and feared him in equal measure. But Aaliyah had wanted nothing except what she had earned. That difference, that clarity, haunted him. He could not dismiss it, and he could not ignore it. Meanwhile, Aaliyah was back at her workshop, surrounded by tools, engines, and a small group of students who looked up to her. She was teaching them not because anyone paid her, but because she remembered what it felt like to be overlooked. She showed them that precision mattered, that patience mattered, and that talent could shine even when no one believed in it. She could see herself in their eyes, the same hunger to be seen, the same quiet determination. That day, the billionaire arrived at the workshop. There were no cameras, no crowds, no applause. He stood at the doorway, watching silently as Aaliyah guided a student's hands on a delicate engine part. She noticed him only after the student stepped aside. She straightened, meeting his gaze, and nodded politely. "You've grown," he said softly. It was not a compliment. It was an observation, and somehow it carried weight. "You said you'd keep your word," she replied simply. Her voice was calm, measured, and steady. There was no anger, no pride, only truth. He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out papers. Legal documents, contracts, agreements, all designed to ensure that Aaliyah's future was protected. She glanced at them briefly, then back at him. "Thank you," she said, "but the real test isn't in papers." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "The real test," she said, "is what we do with the opportunities we're given. That's what changes a life, not promises written on paper." He felt the weight of her words. She had not only fixed his car, she had fixed something inside him that he did not even know was broken. Pride, arrogance, judgment. They had all been challenged by a quiet girl who refused to bow to assumptions. For a long moment, they stood in silence. Outside, the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the workshop. The engines, the tools, the smell of grease and metal, all seemed alive in a way he had never noticed. Life was not about controlling it. Life was about understanding it, respecting it, and learning from it. Then Aaliyah spoke again. "There's more work to do," she said. "Not just for me, not just for my family, but for everyone who doesn't have a chance yet." He nodded slowly. "I understand," he said, "and I want to help. Properly this time. No smirks. No games." That night, the billionaire returned to his penthouse. He was no longer the same man who had laughed on that street. He could feel it. Something fundamental had shifted. He thought about Aaliyah teaching her students about her calm strength and about the way she had forced him to confront his own failings. He had wealth, yes, but she had something far rarer: integrity, patience, and courage. Aaliyah, meanwhile, stayed in the workshop long after the students left. She polished tools, adjusted engines, and made sure everything was ready for tomorrow. But her mind wandered to the moment that had begun it all, the moment when a billionaire smirked and a poor girl shocked the world. She understood now that power and money were not what changed lives. Determination, skill, and the willingness to act, that was what truly mattered. And as both of their lives began to intertwine in unexpected ways, one thing became clear. The car had been the beginning, the spark. But the real story, the story that would ripple far beyond that street, was about respect, trust, and the courage to defy expectation. For both of them, nothing would ever be the same again. The day finally came when everything began to feel real. Not just the contracts, the tools, or the cameras, but the change itself. Aaliyah stood outside her small house, the morning sun casting warm light over the worn walls and cracked sidewalks. Life had not become perfect. Poverty had not disappeared overnight. Bills still existed, and worries still lingered. But something had shifted. Hope was no longer a distant dream. It was tangible, steady, and growing. Her brothers ran ahead, laughing as they chased each other through the dusty street. Their joy was louder, freer than it had ever been. Her mother watched silently, a mixture of relief and disbelief on her face. She had spent years protecting her children from disappointment, from broken promises. Now, for the first time, she allowed herself to believe. Aaliyah had changed too, though not in ways that were easy to see. She walked with confidence that came not from wealth, but from mastery. Every movement, every glance showed the quiet power of someone who had faced doubt, humiliation, and hardship, and had refused to give in. She had learned that life would always test her, but she had learned to respond with skill and patience, not fear. The billionaire arrived later that day, driving a car that now carried more than metal and engine. It carried the weight of respect earned and lessons learned. He stepped out quietly, leaving his usual entourage behind. He had not come to show off wealth or power. He had come to fulfill a promise he had once treated as a joke, now recognizing the value of integrity. Inside the small house, they sat together. There were no cameras, no applause, no crowd of onlookers. Just the girl who had fixed a car with nothing but skill and determination, and the man who had finally learned that money alone could never measure true worth. He handed her the final paperwork, but she did not need it. She already knew what mattered. "Everything you promised," she said, "is important. But it's what I do with it that counts." The billionaire nodded, feeling a humility he had never experienced before. For years, he had thought that power meant controlling outcomes, bending the world to his will. Now he understood that true power was recognizing talent, respecting courage, and keeping one's word. Life outside continued as usual, but the ripples of that day spread far and wide. Friends, neighbors, even strangers reached out to Aaliyah, inspired by her story. Young girls in her neighborhood began believing that their dreams were possible, that skill and courage mattered more than privilege or appearance. Aaliyah took the time to teach them, just as she had learned, sharing knowledge, patience, and confidence. The billionaire, in turn, quietly shifted his own world. He invested in programs for underprivileged children, not for publicity, but because he now understood the true value of opportunity. He saw talent in places he had ignored before, and he began to listen instead of judge. Every time he thought of that street, he remembered the girl who had refused to be underestimated, who had taught him more in one morning than he had learned in decades of business. Even as life settled into a new rhythm, the memory of that first encounter remained vivid. The car had been a challenge, a joke, a test. But the real lesson had nothing to do with engines or money. It was about respect, courage, honesty, and the quiet strength of someone who refuses to let the world define them. Aaliyah walked outside that evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors she had never paused to notice before. Her brothers played nearby. Her mother smiled, finally relaxed. And somewhere in the distance, the billionaire reflected on the lessons he would carry for the rest of his life. In the end, the car had been fixed, the promise had been honored, and a life had been transformed. But more than that, a truth had been revealed. Brilliance and courage often come from the most unlikely places, and no amount of money can replace integrity, skill, and the determination to stand tall when the world expects you to fail. And as night fell, the streets were quiet again, but the story lingered. It was no longer just a tale about wealth, power, or chance. It was about humanity, justice, and the undeniable strength of a girl who refused to be underestimated, changing not only her own life but the world around her.